how I run my painting business. And over the last 13 years of running my own business, I've been pretty crazy about collecting data to make decisions. And then basically 5 years ago, when I got involved with some other painters, you know, I was probably like most of us here, we're lone wolves. We don't talk to other painters. We don't talk to other companies because we're sort of competition. But I started doing that, and there was a free flow of information where I found a whole bunch of painting companies who were doing stuff way better than me. And I basically just said, help me. And they said, okay. And then with all the data I had, I helped them. And it was this great exchange, and we were never really competition. All of our businesses grew together, and it was a really good sort of mutual admiration and relationship. So for your guys' sake, I got a couple cameras going here. I'm going to start one live. You got this one going?
Yep.
Perfect. All right. So there's a lot of data. There's a lot of perspective. There's a lot of anecdotes and stuff in these. It'll be online on Facebook and then archived to YouTube for you guys to reference later. Also, at the end of this, I have my email address, and anything you guys want, I readily give it to you. You just have to make a specific ask, and I will send you specific things. Just don't say, send me all that stuff. I don't make these public. I make these for other painters, for a self-selecting group of people who will take time off, come here, do this, and learn together. So I don't make them public, but if you guys want anything in here, my email address is at the end. So I've been thinking a lot over the last couple of years. I'll get into the history of my company, but we've been doing some pretty innovative things there, and I feel like I need to share that with the rest of everybody. The reason I've been able to do some innovative things in my company is because I've got a lot of help from other painters, and I feel like I should share that now. The two big things that I believe can change our paint businesses right now, if we're not already doing it, and the industry as a whole, is going to be job costing and industry benchmarks. And we're going to go very in-depth into those things as we get to this. So, historic restoration. Who's ever tackled big historic restorations? They're enticing, right? I mean, how many did them in their first couple years of painting? How many did really well at them in their first couple years of painting? Yeah, everybody laughs because we all know. We're first-year contractors, second-year contractors, and we get a call from Mrs. Jones, hey, I got this old house, you want to come take a look at it? And you look up the address on Google, and you're like, oh my God, here we go, this is the big one. You know, I've been practicing my whole life for this. This is going to be on every one of my pieces of marketing. Here we go. And we find out that, like, oh yeah, that wouldn't be bad. You know, a couple days of prep, I could probably get around that thing, you know, 3 days, I could put a coat on, give or take, I don't know, a week or two in and out. Week 6, you know, you're still epoxying rotted wood on the house. And all of a sudden you're like, never forget, never forget. But again, the problem is in our industry, we laugh, but then we do it again. Then we take on another one. Mrs. Jones' neighbor calls and says, oh man, you did such a good job over there. Well, yeah, you paid her to paint her house. That's a great job. And so the neighbor, of course, that neighbor would rave to the neighbor, oh, he's great. He was here for 6 weeks. He charged me $6,500. That was awesome. He did all this extra stuff I did. Oh, it was great. And then so you do the neighbors, well, I got to help out the neighbor too, and I'm going to charge a little more. We'll charge $8,500 this time. I'm recouping my time. The problem is, we're not matching data with feelings on this stuff. And I was lucky enough that I got forced into this trade when I was 10 years old. So by the time I was about 20, I had already gotten a lot of this stuff out of my system, which was a huge advantage. A lot of us don't do that. You know, when I talk to contractors all over the country, they have a string of 5 to 10 years of basically helping out Mrs. Jones on these jobs, never really understanding why they don't make money on a job or where they're losing money on a job. So same thing, new construction. I know we got some really good examples. Mr. Litz here, he does a good example of new construction. Again, young contractor, you get a call from a GC, we got this big beautiful house, here's the plan. You look at that plan, and it's just this massive house, 8,200 square feet, it's got a basketball court, a pool, and you're like, again, this is the one. I cannot wait to get a house like that. Well, you get into new construction, and then you realize why GCs have a bad name. And for those who haven't had a lot of experience with GCs and new construction, you understand, again, why a lot of the times new construction and GCs get a bad name. We're not collecting data from these jobs when we do it. We do one, we say, well, next time, you know what, we need to make, we lost money on this one, or it feels like we lost money. What are we gonna do next time? Well, we'll just work harder. Maybe it was that, maybe we'll just put in longer hours or do something like that. But we're making a guess. We're basically sticking our finger in the air because we don't know. What if the amount of labor hours was right? What if the amount of paint was right? What if we thought, oh my God, I'm broke on this job because I bought too much paint? There's actually a way to figure that out, and that's sort of why I think job costing and industry benchmarks are the things that we can do to change our trade. When I talk to painters all across the country, I usually ask them, people ask me for a lot of things and I readily give them out. I'm kind of an open book. And in exchange, I always say, well, tell me about your job costing. And in 6 months, I think one contractor now has given me back something, here's how I job cost. And that's kind of scary, because job costing is basically revenue from a job minus paint divided by your hours. And then that'll give you a revenue per hour or a gross profit. How much of the job was materials and how much was labor? I'm alarmed by how many contractors do not do that. And the problem is we're doing that in our head right now. Like when we're painting a house, we're adding up the hours in our head and we're adding up the gallons of paint. All we have to do now is put that on paper and then do that for every job. So how do you actually know if you're making money? There's a whole bunch of things we use to figure out if we're actually making money. A checkbook is number one. It's a pretty crappy indicator. In economics, it's called a lagging indicator because again, you do the job, it takes you a week, maybe it takes a week or two to get paid, the money goes in the checkbook. That's a lagging indicator of what's going on. 2 to 3 weeks later, you may be losing your tail, but you get a check in the bank and everything feels good. And it's matching data with feelings. So, I added some extra stuff in here for my fellow Minnesota painters because you guys are very near and dear to me and I want to make sure you get a ton of value out of here. Of all the data I collect, I create these things called master's classes, and it's basically snapshots of what I've done in my business. And the two most popular ones are Modern Apprenticeship, which is my story of going from 0 to 22 painters in 20 months using no experienced painters. It's my way of finding just decent human beings off the street, how we train them, how we keep them, and then how we create a sense of culture in the company to sort of do something different in the trades. And these are some excerpts from that because we're so near and dear to Minnesota here. So as a nation, the reality of what's kind of going on in the industry right now is of all jobs in the United States, not just the trades, 34% of all jobs are unfilled right now. And that's kind of alarming. There's companies out there that need tons and tons of workers for tons and tons of unfilled jobs. In the next decade, our industry, based on Sherwin statistics, is going to grow 8 to 10%. And 18% of tradespeople are boomers. In the next 10 to 15 years, the boomers start exiting. It's called the silver tsunami, and they're not going to be here. So you can see this compounding effect of 18% of the people are leaving at the same time, 10% of 8 to 10% growth in our industry. Now in Minnesota, this is something I use to show why we can't find experienced painters anymore when I do my Modern Apprenticeship Master's class. By the census data, there's 6,700 painters in Minnesota. Technically, there's 3% unemployment in the county that I live in, probably a little bit lower than that. So if you believe that data, 3% of 6,700, at any one time, there's only about 200 candidates in the entire state of Minnesota looking for work. So when people say there's no good painters out there, or I can't find any good people, it's absolutely true. I mean, if you put an ad out on Craigslist or Indeed or ZipRecruiter looking for somebody who knows how to paint in your specific area, what do you think the chances are that they're going to be looking on Indeed or ZipRecruiter at the exact same time and be close enough to you to take a job? Statistically, impossible, improbable. So the feeling we all feel about it's hard to find people, there's no good people left out there, sort of true, but it bears out in statistics as well. So our industry. I always like to have some industry stuff, baseline statistics, just so we can all agree on what we talk about here. So 80% of the entire painting industry in the United States is a one-person company. Data plus feelings. We feel that. That's who we see. I mean, a couple of years ago, that was me. It's a lot of our industry. It's not good or it's not bad. It's a thing. If you have 11 or more employees in the United States, you're in the top 5% of business size. That's kind of a weird feeling, And if you have 20 or more employees, you're in the top 1% of all paint businesses in the United States. So that tells you we're a very fragmented industry. There's a lot of single operators, lone operators out there. And again, it's not a value judgment, it's just an interesting thing in our industry. When you think about how coffee shops were 20 years ago, every coffee shop was a mom and pop organization. Now, Caribou and Starbucks. Huge consolidation, huge ramp up, a gathering of people. You can see that our industry, maybe the product we give is too variable, but we have an industry that's ripe for sort of consolidation like this. So don't be surprised in the next bunch of years we're going to grow 8 to 10%, or the need is going to grow 8 to 10%. 18% of all the people are going to be gone, the experienced ones. A lot of these factors come together into something where we're going to see some change. We don't actually know what it is yet. A lot of things point to a little bit of consolidation, smaller businesses, or a smaller number of businesses, but larger businesses. But either way, the change is coming. You know, we can feel it. There's no, you put an ad out there for a painter now, and you really don't get anybody useful most of the time. So are other painters the enemy? And this is something that I put towards the front of this slide, this show, instead of the end, because when we get Minnesota painters together who don't know me very well, or don't know some of the other familiar faces in this room, who have maybe not been around other painters, who have this open and honest sharing thing, you can kind of put your hackles up a little bit around other painters. You know, you always think, oh, we're kind of in the same territory. We're talking about Lakeville, we're talking about Apple Valley. I mean, this is not far from my house here. I do not believe there's any competition in the residential repaint market in the metro area in Minnesota. If there was, I would still collaborate with other painters because of how it has helped my business so much. Gathering of Minnesota painters. I see members here. Yep, good number of members. The Gathering of Minnesota Painters is just a group that Jason Paris and I started because we were getting together on Facebook and Instagram, collaborating with other businesses. We thought, this is so cool. We are in the Silicon Valley of sort of paint sprayer technology. We got the headquarters of Graco and Titan and Wagner. So now, 4 times a year, we get together as a group, maybe 30 or 40 paint contractors, and Sherwin is a gracious host. We have another paint company as a gracious host. We have Graco and we have Titan, and everybody opens their doors, factories and otherwise, to us, and we get together, they cater a lunch, and then it's 2 hours of open and honest sharing between people. We help each other, we bring in case studies from our own businesses, and it's a great group. There's no dues, there's no anything else, there's not even reading of meeting minutes. We just get together and we share, and it's a great thing. So if you guys are interested, you just go to the Facebook group there and request to be a member, and we'll get you in. And next couple of weeks here, we're going to Titan, the headquarters there, and we're gonna have our next meeting. But I bring that group up because it's a testament to this new breed of contracting where, you know, when I grew up with my father's business, every other painter was the enemy. You know, you'd see a guy at the Sherwin-Williams over in Shakopee, and you'd want to put a screwdriver in his tire because he's obviously stealing food from your kids, right? Because if you're at the same store, you're buying the same paint, I must have lost that customer, he underbid me. You know, it's one of those things. Statistically, when you match data with feelings, it's a whole other story. So Jason Paris, a friend of mine, came up with this. He is a savant with economics, and he actually took a little bit of data from Sherwin and extrapolated backwards what a market share of a painting company in the Twin Cities is. And we did this in order to prove that there really is no competition in the Twin Cities metro market with residential repaint contractors. So again, I'm not going to bore you with all the stuff here, but basically when you take number of paint stores, revenue per store, percentage of the products you use, Sherwin-Williams market share, because other people buy paint elsewhere in here, it's hard to believe, total business revenue for the area, and then you start looking at some industry benchmarks here. Revenue per painter, $55 of revenue per hour per painter. And if that painter works 2,000 hours a year, they should create $110,000 of revenue. So that basically means the total business revenue in this area, there's about a $233 million market cap in the Twin Cities for painting business. Now, the idea is, again, all this bore out to basically prove to you guys that there is no competition, because we always think of the big boogeyman, you know, somebody out there, you know, again, 80% of the industry is one person. If you have 20 more employees, you're in the top 1%, give or take. A 20-person company is about a $2 million painting company, okay? So we always think about there's this boogeyman out there. Somebody's doing 10 million, somebody's got 100 painters, somebody's got 150 painters, a $15 million company, and they must be sucking up the entire market. They're suppressing everybody else. Well, it turns out, if you believe all the back extrapolation of all the numbers, if you had a 50-person painting company, you'd be doing about $5.5 million of revenue. Your market share in the Twin Cities would only be 2.4%. So again, we use this in the Gathering of Minnesota Painters meetings. One of the first things we ever did when we gathered together was Jason got up and presented this thing that he created, and he said, we're all here and we're all looking sideways at each other. We're afraid to say what materials we use, what PSI we put on the sprayer, because you're going to hear about it. Or you're gonna hear about this trick I have with the primer that you thin at 12% and all of a sudden, one of those things. When we do this, everybody put their sword and shield down because we now realize the thought experiment goes, if we have 20 people at the Gathering of Minnesota Painters meeting, and let's just do a thought experiment. Let's just see, maybe we are gonna be competition. Let's say there's 20 of us, we each had 55 painters, huge companies. We each had $5.5 million companies. Technically, if you believe that, we'd each have about 2.4% share of the market. In that room, 20 $5.5 million companies, we would still only take up 48% of the painting market. I was just in St. Louis. St. Louis is a monster metro area. They only have about 5 companies, $5 million plus in the entire metro area there. So if we think that other painters are competition, we're incorrect. We're our own competition. We limit ourselves in the amount of employees we can hire, in the amount of jobs we can sell, and the amount of work we can do. If there is a problem in your business right now, statistically, it's not another painting company. And in fact, I would argue, at least from the Gathering of Minnesota Painters meeting, other painting companies are going to be your biggest asset. I mean, there's a lot of people here. We open and honestly collaborate, and we're all better for it. So again, it's a long way around basically telling you guys, there's a feeling, there's still a feeling, especially when we get in Minnesota around this stuff, that, we're still a little close. Like maybe I don't want to divulge everything. I would make the argument that all the good things that have ever happened in my company have been when I started opening and honestly collaborating with other paint companies. So, onto the job costing and benchmarks. So, most people, this is our way of figuring out if we make money or not, right? The proverbial shoebox full of the receipts. And this is again what you would call a lagging indicator. It doesn't show up on day one. If you're looking for a daily accounting of your profitability, this is kind of a crappy way to do it, right? So, for those of you on Facebook and Instagram, there's something that I witnessed this year, maybe a little more than other years, that I call the December-February paradox. In December, who remembers seeing painters on there going, oh my God, we are killing it. We've never had more trucks. We've never had more people. We've never done more work. I filled the office with staff. We got all these new apps. We're just going great. It's been the greatest year ever. Then February comes. Not so great anymore. Why? What happened in February? Slowed down. What else happened? Weather. Somebody had to talk to the tax man. So the problem with this is that you're not matching data with feelings. This is feelings alone, because you're stacking stuff in your shoebox and you're saying, we're going to figure that out at the end of the year. And there's a lot of paint. I was listening to a podcast about a young painter who started his own paint company on the way up here. And he said, well, I'm a single person painting company. We bought a whole bunch of tools. In your first year, I just assumed I wouldn't make any money, so I didn't pay any quarterly taxes. So you're not going to make any money in your first year business. So he brought his shoebox over to the tax man, and it was a little different story. So again, data plus feeling. You don't want to run a company off feelings alone. So now, when people go see the tax person, all of a sudden, all these familiar faces on Facebook, come February, what is right in the world? I have no idea what's going on. The business is on fire because they were forced to look at their numbers. They were only looking at feelings up until that point. It felt great. We're finishing out a year. Maybe the checkbook has seen a number we've never seen before. We've done more business than we ever have. The problem is you haven't done a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly accounting of if you actually make money or not. And sadly, these people were probably doing it in their head already. They just didn't put it on paper and they didn't track it on every job. This is a much better way to run your company. So this is something that we do internally at my company where we track our metrics. We do it every day, but not as seriously as every week. Every week we have a number to basically say how many hours everybody worked, how many gallons of paint we used, and we can actually come up with a revenue per hour number. Our company as a whole, with all of its painters, produced X amount of dollars per hour this last week. And we can also come up with a gross profit number, which is, we watch two numbers very closely in my business, percentage of material, percentage of labor. And I would argue if you only did those, you would be 98% ahead of all the other painting companies in the United States. At any time during the week, we can basically look and say, this is how much percentage of material, this is how much percentage of labor that we use this week. And as long as we hit our goals, we move on. Very simple numbers to track. We already track them. If we do payroll, Payroll gives you those numbers. If you buy paint through Sherwin-Williams, you have a paint invoice. These are numbers that are already in our business. We're just not taking the time to accumulate them. And I don't know, I would say you can ask the 2 production managers back there, but probably an hour, hour and a half a week it takes to put all this stuff together, give or take. And it tells you it is time spent, but it gives you so much valuable data to make decisions in your business. I'm going to tell you about those decisions here. One of them is what we've done in December of 2019 through February of 2020. The market demand is insanely high. We hire as many people as we can. Our lead time hasn't gone down. I'm sure same thing with everybody else. It's a scramble to hire people to take care of all this work. Because of the data we collected in the last part of 2019, it basically pointed to the decision of, you know what, we're actually pretty good at training people. And so that's not the bottleneck in the business. It's just finding more people to get in. We have a proven process. We know exactly who we're looking for. And if we can get these special people in the door, we have no problem training them. So in the last 3 months, we've hired 13 people in the business. And we come from a little farm town, 7,500 people, New Prague down there. And again, 2.53% unemployment. So if we did not have the data to back up that decision, that is a nerve-wracking decision. It is not advisable to hire 13 people who have, well, 2 people have painted before, Justin. Yeah, so we have 2 people who have self-proclaimed painting experience, 11 people who have never touched a paintbrush before. Not advisable, but the data pointed to it and it's working out swimmingly because we match data with feelings. So I know most everybody in here from Ask a Painter. Sherwin's been a great underwriter of that. It's a weekly live Facebook show. Every Friday I go live, and this one is actually being live for us here for an archive for you guys later. It's a kind of an open thing where I show you guys my business, I show you the experiments I'm doing, and I take feedback from painters all across the United States and the world for a larger part. And it's been a great eye-opening experience for me and my business. It's allowed me to meet a lot of you guys, and I do appreciate it. Also, I am a member of the PCA, the Paint Contractors Association. They're a big reason that I get to go around and do a lot of this stuff. They're another advocate for reforming of the trades and getting bright, progressive minds into the trades and sort of inspiring the next generation to come on. And I would urge you that, you know, I'm not an official for the PCA, but I will say that if you look at the curve of progression and profitability and fun I've had in my business, there's a very steep hockey stick curve there, and right at the base of it is about when I started meeting the people who are members here. So if you're interested, it is another organization out here. It's a group of like-minded people just like this who want to do something different. So 10 years old, like I was saying, I was forced into the trade by my father, painting business. Family painting businesses in here? Yeah, they're really good or really bad, right? It's one of those things. So mine was really bad. So by between 10 and 18, I was kind of, you know, every weekend, every evening, every holiday, every summer, forced to work for the old man. They kept a ledger of all my money for college. And when I went to college, guess where that money was? Nowhere. So I got no money for college from my parents, which was really awesome. So I went into the Army after that. I think it was a little bit of rebellion. I did Afghanistan, Iraq. I came home. And because I wanted to squeeze every nickel out of the government I could, I used my GI Bill to go get a college education. All the while I was in college, I was asking my father, what can I do for our family business? Well, how can I be most helpful? Because I assumed I would come back and help out with the family business. He goes, well, go for business and accounting and marketing, and that's what I did. And this is me just a couple weeks out of the Army, painting the barn with my old man. And my father, my brother, me in front of my old house. It wasn't long after I graduated college, we all sat down. My brother's a designer, my father's the 45-year crusty veteran of the industry that everybody associated with painting in my hometown. And then there was me, a painter, and somebody with a business background, and we were going to form this triumvirate in the family. It was going to be great. We were going to support our 3 families. It was going to be an awesome time. We sat around the dining room table in that house, my soon-to-be wife, my mother, my brother, and basically in no uncertain terms, my dad told me, don't really have a place for you in the business. I was like, well, that's kind of a surprise, huh? I've kind of planned my whole life around it. You've told me how to tailor a college education around this. Like that's, you know, a little bit of a shock, Pops. And I said, well, okay, if that's the case, it's your company. I mean, do what you will. How about I buy in? He's like, no, I don't think you could buy in. It's like, how would I earn it? I mean, I'll just take a lesser wage for a bunch of years and I'll just earn equity in the company. He's like, no, we're not going to do that either. And as sort of a last-ditch effort, I could feel this conversation going downhill. All of this was a surprise. And as a last-ditch effort, I was like, Dad, like, you put my name on the truck, right? And he's like, no, we're not doing that either. And I was like, oh, hey, that's a big surprise. So we had a big blow-up at the table, and I left my own family business shortly after, which is a surprise. I don't hold it against my father, but his business, I think it was a poor choice. I think I would have made a little different choice, but I certainly respect his decision. So, but I've been in business for 13 years now, and right now, this is the first year of business that I had here. You can see old sweet-faced Nick here. This is before 4 kids and all these employees we have now, and I have much less wrinkles on my face and stuff. So, while I was still working for my dad in college, this is a bed and breakfast down in New Ulm. And I went there, and the owner was like, hey, we are restoring this house next year. And again, old house people, I was like, here we go. This is going to be awesome. Crown jewel of my painting experience. And by this time, I knew exactly what went into these things. So I didn't get bamboozled by this client. But yeah, I basically went back to my father and said, I've got a dream house for us. This is going to be great. We got a Victorian mansion. There's a 3,500 square foot carriage house in the back. It's just beautiful, all original siding and everything. And he goes, we're not really interested. That seems like a lot of work, you know? And I was like, well, Dad, ever since I was 13, you haven't got above 10 feet on a house anyway. So I've been doing all the extension ladder work. So like, what's your problem with it? He's like, nah, I don't know. It's just a little far away. It's a lot of work. And, all right, whatever. So when I went off on my own, I called this client. And I went back and I did it all myself. It was one of my first big jobs I did by myself. So I was always very proud of that one, and I make sure to rub it in the faces of the people I employ, because if Nick can do it, you can do it too. I did that whole thing myself, all by hand. So this isn't like, this isn't desk jockey Nick telling you, come on, we need to work harder. It's like, no, I've done these before. I appreciate them. I know exactly how much pain and suffering goes into them. So this is our company now. We got about 20 full-time employees, 5 part-time employees. We got a carpenter on staff, drywall. We got our 2 client concierges, production managers. They're actually here today. In quarter 3, we're bringing on an estimator, and we have that super rigorous apprenticeship program again too. And yeah, this has brought a lot of joy to my life doing this. There's so many awesome people in this company, and yeah, to see all of them start young families and things too, it's a very rewarding thing. And here's my young family. So, focus, again. When I talk to painting contractors, you know, because I'm the loudmouth on social media, people contact me from all over and they're saying, you know, I'm experiencing this problem. And contractors all experience the same problems. I don't know what to charge for this certain thing. How do you schedule? How do you work around weather? I have a client who doesn't like what I did. What do we do there? And there's all these problems around, you know, the painting industry, and we have all these decisions swirling around. And I was too stupid for many years to realize there's a whole bunch of other painting contractors out there who have solved all these things. And everybody else, you know, most of our industry, the 80%, is out there not connecting with other people, and they're trying to solve all these problems, all these kind of simple, you know, experience-driven problems all by themselves. What job costing and industry benchmarks will do is it focused me. You know, instead of worrying about, you know, oh my God, everybody says there's nobody to hire out there. You know, well, we've collected enough data in our company to realize, I don't know, that's not something I should worry about. We seem to have no problem finding a whole bunch of people. But let's worry about something else. Let's worry about retention now, because retention is a problem. You know, everybody's leaving every 1 to 3 years. So now let's spend our time working on that. So the goal today is to figure out, are you making money? And are you making money right now? And how do you make the right decisions? And then I'm going to make an argument that we're worried about a lot of the wrong things. The things we're worried about are a lot of knee-jerk reaction stuff that if you follow the data, we really shouldn't be worried about. So I'm going to go through these things, and comments, questions, anytime, you're not interrupting me. Just like Ask a Painter, this is an open discussion. Whatever you guys want to know about, we'll do it. So, industry benchmark. So a benchmark is something that serves as a standard so you can measure it off something else. A benchmark isn't usually the ideal. It's not the perfect. It's not, you know, I use the hyperbolic word, the perfect painting company. The benchmarks that I use, if all painting companies did the numbers in those benchmarks, they'd be making a lot of money, and the whole industry would be changed overnight. A lot of painting companies do not achieve this sort of thing. It's very hard. These are it, and we're going to go into this more, and I have a bigger version. And again, if you guys want any of this stuff, I have my email address at the end of this, and I can send you anything you want. So, industry benchmarks. Where do these things come from? Like, do they just show up out of thin air? Does somebody have them in this Bible type thing and on a shelf somewhere that they take out? You can track your own data and come up with your own benchmarks, which is helpful. But again, we run really unique painting companies, and sometimes it doesn't work for others. We can go to other paint companies, which I've done over the last 10 years, and then you can go to Department of Labor and Industry. And a lot of other painting companies have used different source data for it, but basically we came up with, give or take, I use a 10-person painting company. These numbers seem to be the most accurate after you go past about 7 or 8 painters, give or take. For a single-person painting company, these numbers might be a little skewed, but the general idea or the spirit of them is about the same. So again, for a benchmark, there's 52 weeks in a year, which we know. I expect my people to work about 50 weeks a year. For some reason, sick kids, holidays, vacations, I assume somebody's not going to work for 2 weeks of the year. If we work 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, that's 2,000 hours a year. $55 of revenue generation per hour. So every time we send somebody out to the field, I would love for them to generate $55 of revenue. Now that includes paint, that includes labor, everything else. If somebody goes out in the field and produces $55 of revenue all day for me, that allows me to pay them, to pay my staff, to pay the paint company, and then hopefully there's something left over for overhead and then my family at the end of it all. But that 55 number will set you up if you have your overhead controlled. It'll set you up to have something called profit at the end of it, which would be very nice. So basically, $55 of revenue an hour. Every painter you employ in an ideal world would make you $110,000 of revenue a year. This is before you pay a whole bunch of expenses. So if you have 10 painters, $1.1 million company. So again, you can start seeing the building blocks of benchmarks in our industry, which is 10 painters will get you about $1 million worth of business, give or take. These are the two most important numbers in the entire industry right here. Materials and labor. We spend all our time tracking these because basically that's 55% of all the costs we're ever gonna have in our painting business are those two numbers. And they're the things we can control the most. In a painting company about this size, you should only be spending about 15% in materials. I think last year, it was Holly's first year as a production manager. I think she brought us in at 12.1%, which is amazing. She brought us in 2.9% under budget on that stuff, which was insane. She's never painted before. Labor, 40%. Again, I point this out to say that, most people, I see my Sherwin rep here, Wes, people beat Wes up all the time because they think they're going to become profitable by holding him upside down and shaking him to try to get money out of him to make profit for their business. If you're looking for profit in your business, I wouldn't go after the 15%. I would definitely go after the 40%. The 40%, the labor, is the low-hanging fruit in all this equation. And then I put something in there called field management as well. So that's production work, production managers. Some people put this above the line, some people put it in fixed. I just leave it in variable for now. But it is a cost of having somebody oversee all this stuff. Now, we're not going to talk about overhead and owner's pay and things like that, only because this varies a lot by different businesses and geographical locations. Today, we're mainly going to focus on the big numbers here. If every painting company in the United States controlled material and labor, instantly, their businesses and their lives would change. So, job costing basically tells you if it's a good job or a bad job. The numbers that job costing spits out doesn't necessarily equate to how good or how bad, but it's a number you can track and then you can see trends over time. And it's kind of the pulse of your company. And the greatest part is we're already doing job costing. Again, when I was a single person painter, I was painting the outside of a house and it took me all week. I'm adding up those gallons in my head. I'm adding up my hours and you're already doing this equation. How much money is that owner gonna pay you? You minus out the materials and then you divide by your hours, and I basically made X amount per hour on this job. We're doing that. If we would just flip our estimates over now and write that out and track it over time, instantly our businesses would change because it would tell us, did we order too much materials on this one? Did we take too much time in labor? Was weather an issue? All those factors. So where does the data come from when we do job costing? Revenue comes from the invoice. What do you bill the client for? This is simple. Again, we already have this stuff. The paint, just talk to Sherwin. They got an invoice for you. They'll tell you exactly how much paint you bought. Hours, If you're doing payroll, that's already calculated for you too. You know, if you're a single owner operator, sometimes you have to calculate your own hours, or at least write them down, but that's the only hurdle to that. And then the $55 an hour is a benchmark. So revenue minus paint divided by hours will give you this metric to basically say, here's revenue per hour. And if you add that up, you know, you get paid for painting the outside of that house, you minus out the paint, you divide it by your hours, and let's say you're at 60. Well, technically, you did $5 an hour better than the industry benchmark. So technically, you did a little bit better than average. If you did it at 40, then you say, well, I did a little worse on that one. What held me up? Was there something I didn't see in the prep work? Did I underestimate it? I mean, there's a whole bunch of things, but at least you can say, why was this job 45 and the other one is 60? And you can actually start looking back and saying, you know, maybe this is the thing. Maybe I'm underestimating paint on every one of these jobs.
Hey,
yes, sir.
So if you are one of the 80% of you a single person in the company, how do you say you're not working a regular 8-hour day?
Mm-hmm.
Like a day is a day to you.
Yeah.
How many hours you put in, you working towards completion.
Mm-hmm.
How would you balance that out over a week's time? Say, I mean, obviously it might still be the same concept with the add, subtract, divide,
Mm-hmm.
but you're doing 12 hours a day, you might do 4 hours tomorrow, 8 hours this day, depending on what the job entails and what you can particularly get done within that day, depending on what you're working on.
Exactly. So if I understand, what I used to do is, back in the day when I was still a single person painter and I had duplicate estimates, you know, on the paper estimates. So I had my aluminum contractor book, I'd flip that sucker over, and on the back side of my estimate, it would just be that. I would track my hours every day. You know, if it took me 5 days to paint that house, it had Monday, 8.3 hours, 8.5 hours, 8 point something. And obviously if I went that evening to do estimates, you just don't record that time in it, but I recorded my time actually doing labor on the job to figure out, like, from the time I unloaded the truck that day to the time I loaded it back up, I just wrote it on the back of that estimate. It was sort of a nice way of keeping track of it. And in the company now, when we have 20 ponies running around, we have a sheet that they fill out every day that just basically says, I'm on the Smith job, we all work 10 hours today, there's 3 of us, so 10, 10, and 10. And then the next day they'll do that, and it's basically just accounting of, you know, job costing for that job. So, it's, again, there's things that we know. We are working those hours, and we know it. If you ask us at the end of the day, how many hours did you paint this house today? You can tell somebody. It's just that act of writing it down so you can reference it later, because our memories are pretty bad, you know? Yeah, we always think at the end of the week, oh, I'll remember this. Maybe it was 44 hours, maybe it's 52, but it makes a big difference. If you had 8 hours to this, that's the difference between a 45 and a 60 sometimes. And now you don't, you know, garbage in, garbage out sort of thing. So, how do we get clean data? This is exactly what we were talking about. Work orders are things where an estimate gets turned into something to take into the field, so your painters can actually do something with it. In my company, we call them jump sheets. The employees named them, and just like I was saying, they record their hours here. All this is a super fancy way of job costing. All we want to do is have an instruction manual for the painters in the field. So they take this into the field and it tells them where they're going to go, and it tells them what they're going to be doing here. But most importantly, it tracks all their hours here, and then it lists the coatings that they use here. So at the end of the job, one of the production managers can just add up the hours, add up the paint, and then we have a percentage there. And our painters track that every day. It's a pain for 40% of them to do it every day. We have to remind them, but it is what it is. We tell them how valuable it is and how appreciative we are. And this is basically just a fancy color-coded way of job costing when I can't be there for every job. So how do you get clean data? This is a fun one we did last year. We went through something called the Reformation, which was a 3-month process where we wanted to test the limits of how good and how fast our company could do. And I wanted to see what we could squeeze out of humans as far as the production standards. So what we did in Q3 of last year was broke everybody down into single person crews. We started working 4-day work weeks, 4 10s, and then we tracked every single person every day, how much revenue they produced, and then we tracked it over time. And we basically just said, you know, here's the standards of the company. If you fall below those standards, we're going to coach you. If you're not coachable, we will probably end up firing you at the end of this. And it was an experiment to basically say, you know, we need ultimate accountability in the company. But again, if you're trying to figure out, you know, all these numbers are muddy. I can't really get a good revenue per hour number. I can't get a material percentage or labor percentage. Take one of your employees or take your helper and put them in their own bedroom and have them paint their own bedroom. That's easy. You go in the other one, split them up, and now you have pure, clean data to track from there. So, again, where does the data come from? Anybody use Slack in here? The app, Slack? See Donnie in the back. Good to see you, sir. I was nervous. Donnie's here. Oh, man. So, where does data come from? We use a communication app called Slack. It's free for the most part, and every day at 3 p.m., which at the end of this presentation will be 3, and we get an update from every single person in the field about what got done that day. So last week when I was traveling, I saw every single one of the crews at 3 p.m. say, we're on the Smith job, we're 80% done, we've used 90% of the budget, and here's the major milestones that we got done today. So you can instantly get a pulse for the company, and then the production managers track that with those jump sheets and verify that everything got done the way it was supposed to be done. But it's another way of feeling, what are we getting done today? Is the project falling behind? Do we need to put some more people on it? But it all adds up to the data again. And remember, like we talked about, you know, recording your own time. Garbage in, garbage out. That's an old tech saying. If you put garbage data in, you do all these equations, you're going to get garbage data out. So it has to be as pure and as clean data as you can possibly get in order to make decisions. Okay, so simple job costing with employees. Now there's another way of figuring out this whole equation. Again, we're trying to gather some basic data saying, how am I doing? Am I doing good? Am I doing bad? And what things do I need to be focusing on? If you have employees, what we do is basically say, add up your paint and divide it by the revenue, and that'll give you a material percentage. And again, that's the magic number 15. On every single job we do, we look at 2 numbers at the end of it. We match feelings with data. So we leave a house and the client's super happy. Oh my God, you guys are the greatest. She made cookies. You know, we're petting the dog. Everything's just awesome. And then we go back to the job costing. Well, how good was it? Because it felt good. And now we have to figure out, well, maybe we did such a good job. We just decided to do twice as much work for them than we needed. You know, and the job costing will bore that out. So instead, you know, I ran a business on feelings for a lot of years where you'd make a whole lot of people happy, but you didn't actually know if you were making money or not. And that's not the situation we want to be in. A good business owner will marry those two. Again, with labor too, you take how much labor, you divide it by the revenue, it'll give you a labor percentage. Again, we try to hit that 40%. These numbers are not perfect. If you hit these 2 numbers, you're not guaranteed to make money, but these will set you up better than any 2 other things that you can track in your company. And again, for field management, for the production managers' salaries, we add in about 5% just to oversee it all, and we want a gross profit of about 40 at the end of all that. Questions before we go on to the next one? And again, I can send these all to you guys if you like. So now here's the big problem with this equation here. When we take into account labor, it seems simple, right? You hire somebody at $18 an hour, they work 40 hours a week, 18 times 40, labor cost, right? That would be no point.
No burden.
There's no burden. Burden is a monster. If you do not calculate burden, you will probably be about 25% off in your labor calculation. So if your labor's coming in at 40, you might be at 50 if you don't calculate burden. Now, burden is the cost of employing somebody. We know it's not just wages. If you've ever done payroll with a bunch of people, you know that they pay a little. You're shaking your head. Yeah, absolutely. They pay a little and you pay a little as a business owner. There's a whole bunch of costs associated with hiring somebody above and beyond their wage. FUTA, SUTA, Social Security, Medicare, federal income tax, state unemployment, and work comp. These are all costs of actually employing somebody. And this is super accurate data here because this is basically for just south of the metro residential repaint. Excuse me. The average is about 25% added to the cost of a wage. So again, if you hire somebody for $10 an hour, they probably cost you $12.50 an hour to employ. I'm gonna give a drink of water here. Any questions about this stuff?
How do you handle service and callbacks? How do you work that in?
We track that. In our job costing, there's actually a checkbox we have. If we get legitimately called back because of just something didn't meet the standards of the client, obviously we address it, but then we check mark it there, And my 2 production managers are actually incentivized on a percentage of callbacks. So it's in their best interest to either catch up before or handle them really quickly after. Exactly, yeah. But we generally, as a company, we attack them. If we even sniff out that somebody's the slightest bit displeased, I mean, we're smothering them, basically.
Builders, etc., will call you back randomly, you know, to know what you're going to get into.
That's exactly it, yeah. Oh, yes.
So when you are giving information your burden, and you are deciding on how much you're going to see someone,
Mm-hmm.
is that when you decide to multiply your hours rate times 25%, and then you decide how much you want for your revenue? Or is your revenue always the same, you know, add 25% on top of that?
Yes, you know what, I know exactly what you're asking. I don't, excuse me. So maybe it was a self-selecting group, so you can believe some of that wages, but if you were to believe that way, that you would end up paying somebody about $26 or $27 an hour starting wage, you know. Then you'd be looking at that too. So,
looking at your hourly wage, thinking I need just that.
yep, and this is one of those things too where when I hire people for painters, an interesting thing that we do is, excuse me, we, at the end of the interview, I actually just ask them what they want to be paid. And universally, it's usually lower than what I probably would offer them, you know. So it's one of those things where I take into account market rate a lot more. What I found generally is that if you get an 18 to 20-year-old person, unmarried, no kids, really no bills, no mortgage, I mean, they're going to be looking for somewhere between $13 and $15 an hour. And then it basically just goes up from there. You know, when you have a coupled person with a mortgage and some bills, they're going to need at least about 18, give or take. So that's, you know, exactly. And, you know, burden be damned, that's what they want. And they'll go find it somewhere too, you know, because, again, in kindergarten, pull us all aside and say, who ever dreamt of being a painter? I was the son of a painter, I didn't even say it. So again, this is not somebody who's looking for their dream job coming to you. They're going to take a 17.5-hour job, and it could be at a grocery store, or it could be at a welding place. So, yeah, one of those things. So again, 18 bucks an hour, 40 hours a week. Pretty simple, right? 720 bucks. Huge mistake. This is the cost of hiring that person per week. Now, again, still doesn't seem like, whatever, you know, it's nobody's perfect, no numbers are going to be pure and perfect. The problem is, here's an example of my own payroll from last week. $10,000 in wages, here's the burden. The labor burden percent actually calculated, because I like to track, you know, our averages, so it's actual, so when I say it's 25% burden, we get about that. Now, here's the problem. If I would not have taken into account burden for that week, I would have been 10 grand off in my expenses last month. You would have missed 10 grand in labor cost last month. And again, data plus feelings, this is the December, February paradox. We are killing it. I'm doing 10% better than all other painting companies in the United States for labor. I just forgot burden, sorry, never mind. It's one of those things. So, a little more complex. Again, when I show you guys this stuff, this is still that simple equation of how much paint, how much labor. That's all we're doing. Now, we want to add on to it to start making some decisions, and this is what we do. I shouldn't say we, this is what they do every week, and then we review it every week. Every time a job is done, we list it here, and then all we do is basically list, here's the paint, here's the labor, and then we color-coded these boxes based on green, it met the standards or the benchmarks, and red, it did not meet the standards or the benchmarks. And this is our way of sort of tracking each job. You asked about callbacks. Black boxes here are something we get callbacks on. We actually track the percentage, and I can't remember the number off the top of my head, maybe one of my client concierges can, but we tracked the number for 2019, and it was some astronomical number, like if a job got a callback, how much more unprofitable? Was it 30% more unprofitable than another job? Oh, it was amazing. Like there was a huge difference between, if we didn't get a callback on a job, we made 30% more money on it than when we got a callback. So again, we're tracking this data to say, callbacks don't seem like a lot, right? You're like, well, we'll just, I you know, missed a little spot in a corner or something, or missed a couple putty holes in some woodwork. We'll just go there next week. the cost of going there next week is sometimes 30% of the job, or 30% of the profit you would have had. Once we found out about that, we focus our entire lives on killing callbacks now. The whole company is set up against callbacks now. I see a lot of shaking heads too, because we've all been there. It just seems simple, yeah, I'll just stop in and we'll just fix this little thing. It's never that. So, again, here's the materials here. Here's the labor, and remember, the star here, the burden. We take into account the burden right on this thing, so that when we figure out a job, we're actually figuring out the actual cost. And so we have a good idea right now. Instead of taking it a month later or a quarter later and adding in burden, we do it every single job we do. Yes?
So we talk a lot about the materials and labor.
Mm-hmm.
And then something I was recently thinking about is where do we even think about adding a certain percentage on our jobs for bringing all our tools? Or do you just say this is an hour to bring all our tools and this is, how do you make up for the money that you spend on all of those stuff?
Overhead.
Overhead.
Yeah, so basically what we do is that, I don't want to go back too far in the slideshow here, but basically on the benchmarks, let's see if we have we don't have a benchmark. But remember there in that thing of industry benchmarks, material, labor, field management, and then there's a line, and then there's the overhead and owner's salary. That's the overhead part. And overhead, I leave that vague because some people run a subcontracting model and labor is broken out differently. Some people have lots of vehicles, a big facility. Some people don't have any of that. They got their family car and no facility, and then magically overhead is a lot smaller. Some people have their spouse working, and that is a lot of overhead. So it's different for every company. Absolutely. Yeah, and there's two main, absolutely, there's two main types of expenses in a company. There's variable and fixed. A variable expense is an expense you incur only when you get a job. So if you're starting off a painting company and you don't have any work, you don't have to buy any paint. It's great. You don't incur any labor cost either. The second you get a job, you got to go buy some paint and you got to put some labor towards it. Now, if your spouse is assisting you in the office, whether you have work or not, technically they're being paid. Your shop rent. You don't pay for your shop rent only when you have work, you know? So that's everything that's a fixed cost that's not going away is that. And then everything else is variable. Any other questions before we? All right. So again, same thing. This is just you can see the callback thing here. We track the revenue per hour. We track the gross profit, the material, and the labor. Field management here. Basic job, we just put the revenue in there. This is the hourly budget for the job. And then based on the material and the labor, it spits this out for us. So again, this is I picked this job because it's a good example of labor did not meet the goal. Remember, our goal is 40% here for labor. So my guys from the field might be feeling really bad about this job. Like, oh man, we didn't hit our budget. This is terrible. But look at production managers. They save 9% in material cost. We're trying to hit 15 with materials. They only spend 6% on this job. So maybe it was one of those enamel jobs where you're spending a lot of labor hours, but only a little bit of enamel hand touching up a big house or something. That's one of those occasions where, again, you want to match feelings with data because your guys from the field might be thinking they're going to get fired. But you're like, hey, take it easy. Our production managers are doing a really good job. This was a labor-intensive job. We actually did, remember our goal for gross profit is 40. We actually did 5% better than the benchmark. Ryan.
Sorry, I may have asked you this before, Nick, but workman's comp, is that part of the 40% or is that an overhead?
Labor burden.
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry, I missed that.
So yeah, this is one thing where I just added in work comp a little bit ago here, just because somebody brought it to my attention, like, where's your work comp? I said, oh, that's a really good point. Don't want to miss any of that burden. Yes, sir?
What do you do for adding like your time for the sale? You know, like say you gotta drive 45 minutes to go meet these people, you're with them for 2 hours to make the sale, you have to go back, type it up. You know, there's a lot of BS beforehand to even get the job, so how do you track that?
Absolutely.
That is a big portion of it, you know.
I treat, when I was a single person painting company, I treated the sales process and the production process as two separate things. You know, because eventually, the person who does the sale is not going to be doing the painting. So you want to have separate metrics for those. So when I put on the salesperson hat, those were my hours in the evenings. And I didn't track hours for estimates, I just tracked number of estimates. Because that's a more sort of useful thing. I actually have a benchmark for you guys for that too. So what I did, I think I did about 800 estimates last year. My close ratio is about 47%, and on an industry benchmark, 45 to 50%, you're almost perfect. So for me, you know, you're losing half your jobs, but the industry benchmark is that, so now I don't feel bad about it. But I track, instead of my hours for the estimates, I just track the number of estimates, and I just try to say, instead of saying, what are my hours invested in the estimates, I'd say, I need to close about half my estimates. So over the course of a week or a month, if I'm closing about half, I know I'm doing a good job, you know? And then you can, I mean, tracking hours per estimates is pretty in-depth. I don't even go that far. But the downfall of something like that is, you know, we go and take a look at a historic restoration, and it's $32,000. That could be a 3-hour estimate, or doing one bedroom could be a 3-hour estimate. So, you know.
If you get the job, it pays for itself. And then if you have drive time for the job, then you can estimate that in for your employees.
Yep. And also, you were asking about overhead. Sales really goes into overhead for me, because you're going to have that whether you get jobs or not. So for me, when you go below that line into the fixed costs, with your owner's salary and then with your overhead, your salespeople and your marketing people are really in overhead there. So, did I answer your question? Good. Okay, so data. Data plus feelings equals good decisions. Mediocre data is your checkbook, your taxes, and your monthly paint bill. Checkbook is, again, a super lagging indicator. A lot of paint companies are driven by the feelings they get from their checkbook. They've gone through hell on that old Victorian restoration. They know they're losing money. A week or two later when the client pays you, it's such a big check, you put it in there, you still feel good. You really need to make that up with the data from the job to actually know if you're feeling good. Taxes too. Taxes are the worst lagging indicator. This is the December-February paradox. Oh, we're just killing it. We're doing amazing work. Until the tax man tells you if you're actually doing good work or not. And that is the worst lagging indicator because a whole year has gone past. And you can't make any decisions then for the last year. That year is gone. And then monthly paint bill. Monthly paint bill isn't bad, but again, you've done 4 weeks worth of work with this stuff. And if you're not tracking it weekly or even daily, it is a lagging indicator. So good data would be job costing, benchmarks, and then the goal tracking, which I'll get into in a little bit here. So again, a lot of us run our paint companies off of the feelings, which are, we make a lot of happy clients. And maybe the checkbook suffers, and maybe we start resenting our clients a little bit because we're doing so much good work for them, and maybe there's not a lot there. We have happy apprentices and happy craftspeople in our company, like, yeah, we're paying them really well, there's always work, we're just not controlling costs, and so the owner doesn't make anything. Then a little bit of resentment builds because everybody else is getting a paycheck and maybe you're not. Selling a huge project, again, big new construction, big Victorian restoration, big homeowners association, we've all been allured by those sort of things. And if we haven't done them before, they're very sort of, it's a siren song. We sell a project like that, and if we haven't done them before, we don't actually know what it takes to produce something like that, and we kind of get in a quagmire a lot of the time. Also, who's been on estimates? You've had a string of these where somebody's like, man, you're twice as much as the other guy. We get that all the time. And years ago, again, this is why data plus feelings is so important. If I follow my closing ratio on my bids, and I know that, listen, already this year, I'm keeping about a 50% closing ratio on my estimates. And I go out tomorrow and I do 3 estimates in the afternoon, and every person says, this is way too expensive, or you're twice as expensive as the next guy. In years past, I would have gone home and been like, I'm a crook. I need to redo all my pricing. I must be doing something wrong. They obviously know something I don't. But if I have the data to say, hey, I'm still closing 50% of my estimates, the next time I go out, I might get 3 in a row. So you can't be making these snap judgments based on the feelings if you don't have the data to go with it. That's sort of the thesis of this whole thing. And then decisions. So, employees and deliverables. This is one of the biggest mistakes that paint companies make besides not tracking material and labor, which is they hire people and you treat them like my dad treated me, which was, hey stupid, go faster and go better. And it's like, well, what does that mean? I'm 10 years old. Like, what do you want from me? You're not even paying me, you know? The biggest mistakes that people make when they hire somebody is there's not a clear deliverable. There is absolutely a clear deliverable for everybody here who employs people. It's called a paycheck. And you're going to give that to whoever you employ, whether they produce or not, for their hours worked. In turn, you should have an exact deliverable from them so that, you know, when they get their paycheck, there's an exact thing you can ask for and hold them against. In my company, we call it the standards. We ask people, again, I use benchmarks. We want people to produce at $55 of revenue an hour, and we want them to have less than 5% callbacks on their work. And again, like the way my father raised me in the business, do faster, do better. What does that even mean? Am I going to be fired or promoted? I mean, I feel like I'm killing myself here. So what does that mean? In my company, we can tell you. We can tell you, you've produced $55 of revenue an hour, and you've got 5% or less callbacks on your job. And if you haven't, we're going to coach the living daylights out of you until you do. And if you don't, you go to the gas station or something. So, employee pay. So here's the big question about employee pay again. An employee comes to you, and this is the best case scenario when somebody's been working for you for a while, and it's the old proverbial $1 an hour raise per year, give or take. You know, we have that annual review. This feels like the time I should ask for a pay raise, and it's been a year, so I should probably just get that $1, right? Well, we make value propositions in the company, which is, if you want that extra money, here's what you have to produce. So again, that magical benchmark of 40% labor in the company. If you come to me and you say you want to make 25 bucks an hour, that's great. You produce $62.50 an hour instead of 55, and you'll absolutely make that. No problem. If you want to do even more than that, go 70. We could probably give you 28. But it's a value proposition, it's a deliverable. Instead of just saying, I feel like I've been here a while, and I feel like I've suffered in your company enough where I want to raise, you can say, no, let's both win together. I'll pay you more, you produce more. And now we can hold each other accountable. Crew assignments. So when you have all the data from the crews, our two favorite people in the company are somebody we call Cowboy, which brings in, production managers are smiling, he brings in every job 20% under budget, and then there's a guy everybody calls Patches. Patches has been famous for doing 800 patches in an average bedroom before because he's a perfectionist. And he had the distinct honor of basically never having a callback in a year and a half in working with me, which I don't think has ever been done before. Now, we track the data on him about the callbacks and everything else, and we realize that one person's going way under budget, but they miss a few things, and one person is doing insanely beautiful museum quality restoration work, but goes a little over budget. We're mating up Patches and Cowboy, and it's a dream team, because one will watch out for the other. One of them will make the other guy nervous and move quicker. The other one will pick up the, let's say there's one cabinet door that goes missing from every kitchen job. Well, Patches is there to make sure that cabinet door doesn't do that anymore. So, but if you don't track that stuff, you don't know. You can just say, well, they do good, whatever, but you can make intentional decisions based on that. You can also say, where's the friction? Most people think, incorrectly, that they're spending too much money on paint, or they're using too much paint, or they're somehow getting bamboozled with paint. Really, when you look at the list of things going wrong in painting companies, that's probably number 4 or 5 on the list of things that are on fire most of the time. But job costing and benchmarks will actually tell you that. So, a couple examples here. Owner-operator, feelings plus data. I love the fence stuff. Again, who's ever, young contractors doing first fences, who's ever been surprised by the amount of stain used on a fence? Oh yeah, those thirsty Minnesota cedar fences, man. Think, yeah, I'm just gonna wash this thing real quick. The washing goes super easy. I'm gonna get that 5-gallon bucket. I'll have a gallon and a half left over. This is gonna go super smooth, and 6 trips to the old Sherwin later. You're like, my God, a 5-gallon bucket went 20 feet. You gotta be kidding me. What's this fence made out of? It's so thirsty. So anyway, I use this example as an owner-operator versus an employee-based company. So 28 gallons of stain on this fence back here, give or take 25 bucks a gallon, just to make it even. We got about 700 bucks in material. As an owner-operator, we're super skilled. Nobody's ever gonna work as good and as fast as we will. So we can wash this fence in 4 hours, and with our sprayer, we can get out there, spray it in 8 hours. It's great. Now, at the end of this, you can see we got about 12 hours into this, but if we're flipping that estimate over and we're saying, oh my God, they're only paying me 1,500 bucks and I just spent 700 bucks in stain, you gotta be kidding me, I'm gonna lose my tail on this job. That's a feeling. The data, if you actually do the revenue per hour calculation, you did $66 of revenue an hour. That's $10 more than the industry benchmark. So again, the feeling is paint costs too much, stain costs too much, and I'm gonna lose my tail on this job. But in actuality, you're doing about 10% better than the industry benchmark. Yes?
Would that $25 per gallon be list price or someone has discount price?
So here's the deal. I put, We put material burden in as well. In Minnesota, we have paint care, which is a recycling thing, and we also have taxes. So when we take, if Sherwin gives us this for $23.35 a gallon, there's a little bit of state tax, and then there's that $1 per gallon paint care. That's all in there. So again, if we, what's that? So for us, it's sort of just wrapped up into the price, give or take. So, thanks, Steve. See you guys.
Take it easy.
You mark it up or you just?
Not intentionally. When we do time and material work, we mark it up slightly, only because we have to verify the colors and go get it, but otherwise, no, we don't.
And let me ask you this.
Yes.
When you are purchasing paint, so I'm sure we all know how to divide square footage and total square footage. Would you account for a little bit over the square footage?
Yeah, so
Say 20,000 square foot, you get amount of paint, you get enough to cover at least another 1,000, 2,000 square foot, something. Just to
exactly.
compensate for-
We sort of think about paint ordering in two ways, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when we do it on a whole bunch of the standard smaller projects, if we're just repainting the main floor of a house, we can guess within a gallon, because we've all done it. When we're doing 1,000 feet of fence, what we normally do is the two order method, which is, listen, I know we're probably not gonna use more than 30. I feel like 20 is too light. Let's just get 20 or 25 to start, and we'll see how far it goes. Then we'll get that last order to sweeten, because again,
Exactly.
what we don't want to do is have another 15 gallons of this stuff laying on site too. So again, with materials, or excuse me, with employees now, same thing, $28 or 28 gallons, $25 a gallon. Same thing here, but now we're calculating a percentage. So remember, 15% is our goal. This is a super thirsty fence. We use 47% instead of 15%. That's tracking the data. Now with employees, you got a $15 employee and an $18 employee. We got a $51 burden, $200 worth of total labor, so 17% in labor. And remember, our goal is 40. So technically, we throw in some field management there. When we put employees on here and field management on it, our gross profit is a much different story than revenue per hour. Again, owner-operators are usually way more efficient. This is sort of statistically what I find when painters get a hold of me in the United States. Typically, they do very well like this. So they think, well, let's just add some employees. So we add some employees, and all of a sudden, we're tracking gross profit instead of revenue per hour, and our goal is 40, and we're only hitting 31. Now, this isn't bad. This isn't losing money. But again, if you want to set yourself up to actually be able to pay for your overhead and your sales and stuff, you're going to need that extra 9% in there. Because this 9% now comes out of everything below that fixed cost in there. All right, feelings versus data. Again, remember this whole thing. You're twice as expensive as this. It's the story of I've got 3 of these in a row. I'm rethinking everything about the painting business. I need to restructure all my pricing. I'm going to not have any work this winter because I'm overcharging. I track my SR, success ratio, with estimates. It's about 47%. I know from talking to painting companies around the United States, from talking to the PCA, you should be at about 45 to 50%. Economically, this tells you if half of the people accept your bids and half of the people do not, theoretically you're priced correctly. That's just kind of a law of economics, give or take. That does change when you're a single owner operator. When you're a single owner operator, because there's so much demand out there, you don't need to have 50% of all your jobs accepted. I see anywhere from 10 to 30%. From when I was a single person operator, I only needed 10 to 30% because, listen, if I do advertising or not, people are going to find me and they're going to call me, especially in May in Minnesota. You don't need to close 50% of those jobs because we book up 2 years in advance if we did that. So for a company of 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 plus painters, this is a healthy close ratio. Right now, if we're running 20 people and I'm closing 70% of my jobs, what does that tell me? Underselling. Huge. If I'm only getting 20%, overpriced a lot. So that kind of lets you know, I mean, when people say, what are you supposed to charge for something? Do 100 estimates and then look at the data. Don't do 100 estimates and go for the feelings. Go for 100 estimates and look at the data, and that'll tell you what to do. So again, what should we really worry about? Look at this poor little Sherwin-Williams paint counter guy here. We beat up our Sherwin guys a lot. I do too. It's fun. Well,
Real
but
fun.
if I'm looking to find some free flowing profit in my business, it's not through this 15% that I'm spending on paint. And as a matter of fact, like I told you before, Holly kept our material cost to 12.1% last year. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of blood you can squeeze out of that stone anymore. There's always efficiencies, but we're not going to make up huge. If Sherwin-Williams gave us another 50% discount, after all the discounts we have, we would still only find about another 6% in our business. Okay, so we go after labor. Labor is everything. So remember, if you work an extra hour a day, that's about 12.5% added production for the year. That'll make up for any paint. It'll negate your paint expenses for the entire year. If you have employees, an extra hour a day, there you go, 12.5%. So that's where we look for efficiency in our business. So other benefits of job costing. We're getting towards the end here. I know we're all getting antsy. Production rates. So again, who wants production rates? This is what tells us next time we do one of those fences. We did a calculation because I'm not doing another one of those fences where I spend $1,000 in stain, you know, and a 5-gallon bucket takes me 20 feet of it. 80-foot fence, 8 feet high, 2 sides. Obviously, you got to do 2 sides. So we got 1,280 square feet divided by the 8 hours. We can do 160 square feet an hour. And that basically tells us that when we back in the price there, we basically charge $1.17 a square foot for that fence. Now, for the owner-operator making 66 bucks an hour, you'd say, hey, that's actually pretty good. Let's shoot for $1.17 a square foot on that fence all the time. But again, if you're in the employee model, remember the gross profit was a little low. You may have to bump it up to $1.25, $1.35, and let's see if the market will still hold that. But this will allow you to do that. And then on the inside of my aluminum contractor book, just like this gentleman here, I used to have my little cheat sheet of prices where it's like, listen, when we do those steel metal pole buildings, get a square footage. We're all calculating it, you know. Whenever we're doing fences, the easy stuff like that, I had my little cheat sheet in there to basically say when I'm out on an estimate, you know, here's the last time I did it and here's what I made. Is this fence like that or not like that? You can also do bonus and incentives and for estimating as well. So what's interesting here is this is a bedroom breakdown where I painted a bedroom and we had an apprentice paint a bedroom and we tracked the production rate of it. And basically, we charge $425 for the bedroom, so the square foot price doesn't change. It doesn't matter who paints it. The square footage is the same and the price is the same. But in production rates, I did 161.8 square feet an hour and an apprentice did 69.3. So again, production rates are good, but whose? And when you're in your business, if I made the mistake early on of saying, well, I mean, this is how I paint. Every single person I hire is going to paint exactly like me. I couldn't figure out why my numbers weren't matching a lot of the times. Well, it turns out, like I said before, nobody's going to be as thoughtful and as quick or as diligent as us working in our own company. So we got to sort of gather multiple data. Here's mine. We know that most people aren't going to do better than that, at least now, without some more experience. And for the apprentices, this is a pretty good average. So when we get a new apprentice come in, this apprentice did 69.3 square foot an hour. If we have an apprentice who does 50 square feet an hour, we'll say, well, for apprentices, that's kind of low. Or if an apprentice comes in at 100, we're like, ooh, we got a speedy one here. So that's good. But we can actually say that because we have the data. Now, the bedroom pricing experiment. This is actually pretty interesting. I went down to St. Louis, and I've done this a couple times. I have an estimating master's class where we basically go through a triangulation of price, how to figure out what to charge for something. And as a little crowdsourcing experiment, we handed out paper to everybody in the audience. We showed a picture of a bedroom and very strict parameters of, we're gonna paint just the walls in this bedroom. All I need from you is job costing. You tell me how many hours and how many gallons of paint you're gonna use on this job. And we aggregated them up. I think there were 75 people that submitted their bedroom. The average price was $422. The average material cost was $77, so we're probably looking at 2 gallons of paint. And the average labor hours was 7. Now the interesting thing, statistically, we look at high and low. The highest person in the room is going to charge $850, the lowest $240. That's market price. It's interesting. So when we go out there and we're twice as expensive as the next guy, yeah, there was somebody in that room who charges half as much as us. It's hard to say. Maybe they have the metrics to prove it. Maybe it's just a feeling that they need to charge for a room like that. Now, the interesting thing is we queried, I think this one was 75 or 76 painters in St. Louis. The crowdsourcing average, you know, the wisdom of the crowds, they came up with the average market price in St. Louis to paint a bedroom, 15 by 15 bedroom walls, $422. Guess how much that I charge for that bedroom here? We're within $3 for each other. So crowdsourcing, the market, you know, when we try to figure out, like, it's this mystical number, we don't know what's the highest price I can charge a client for something without, you know, losing the job. If you do enough of them, technically, what we did in that crowd was like doing 75 estimates and then gathering all the data from it. So I just thought that I would share because there's not many places you can go for market rate data for bedrooms and things like that. So weekly job costing. This is another interesting thing where we take the job costing from each job and then we just add up what we did during the week. So instead of just a single job now where we can say that job was a good job or a bad job, as a company, we kind of want to put it all together and see what we look like. So every weekend, these two people put this together and we verify it every Monday. Again, this is nothing more than, here's the revenue that we brought in that week, here's all the people's hours, and here's our material cost over in the corner. And then this spits out, again, more numbers up here to tell us, did we do good, did we do bad? So micro job costing, which is by job, is an awesome thing. You can build up big numbers, you can build up a year off of that, and it'll tell you what your gross profit for the year is. The next metric we like to use is the week. Based on all the stuff we got done last week, or you know, what does this week look like? And then we can make decisions based on that. Because if you just look at every job, you're looking at individuals on an individual job with different variables. This, as a company, we can start tracking some pretty cool progress. So, training costs. I thought I would share this with you guys because everybody asks us quite a bit. What's the cost of hiring and training a decent human being? So one of my people off the street, we don't go for a lot of experienced painters. We've got lucky with a few here or there, but my batting average is very low. I would say probably 10 to 15% of the experienced painters we bring in actually meet our core values and can actually paint, which is interesting. So here's what I found after collecting data for the last couple of years. Typically, a person, a decent human being off the street who's never painted before, typically asks for a low wage, 12 to 14 bucks an hour, if you ask them. They slow down my craftspeople, which everybody else says that. Yeah, but what happens when you put them with somebody who's experienced? Yes, they will slow them down. That's inevitable. It just is what it is. Hourly job budgets, which we've talked about before, are 55% higher than average. Labor cost goes up 15 to 18%. So again, remember, if we're aiming for 40, we're probably going to be doing about a 55 if you throw a greenhorn on the job site. Not the end of the world. It's not something where it costs you a lot of money. In aggregate, over the last 2 years, training decent human being has not cost the company any money. Worst case scenario, they cover their own cost, even with burden and all that other stuff. How fast can we create a painter? Usually with support in 1 month. So that means we have somebody called Tina, trainer Tina. She's in charge of the apprenticeship program. All the new recruits go to her. In 1 month, she can be on site, put that person in that separate bedroom, and they can complete it usually with one question, give or take, about something particular. A painter with support, 4 to 6 months, or without support, excuse me. So basically, that person that Tina trained, in 4 to 6 months, we can send them with a van out to a bedroom, and they can do one of our standard painting processes in there. And then craftsperson or crew leader, usually between about 9 months and a year, we give them their own crew, and they can basically do all the standard operating procedures in our company to the standard, I guess. So, benchmarks, making decisions. Based on these benchmarks here, people always think, and I thought incorrectly as well, listen, I need help ordering paint, I need help setting up the job sites. Everybody tells me I need a production manager. That's a lot of money. That is a ton of money out there. How am I ever going to hire somebody who doesn't paint for that much money and I'm not going to go bankrupt? Well, if you actually look at your budgeting and the benchmarks, technically only 5% of your revenue has to be dictated or set aside for a production manager. And if you budget for it, it's not that hard. The feeling is it's a super high expense that we can't afford. The data is absolutely. If you're doing this much work, if you have 10 painters, you should have a field manager supporting them. So how about strong culture? This is another kind of sneaky one where you can say, well, how can you use industry benchmarks to figure out if you have a good culture in your company? The feedback I've got from companies across the United States is that if you can get one painter to work 2,000 hours a year, you have an insanely good company culture because they actually show up for work a lot. I was kind of really surprised I mean, this is sort of a standard in our company. We have some people that hammer tons and tons of overtime and everything else. I'm always surprised that when I hear from other companies, oh man, if you can get a guy to work 1,800 hours in a year, you're doing really good. They're always, they're on vacations, they just randomly get hurt all the time, they're calling in sick once every 2 weeks. And I mean, I was like, wow, if I lost 200 to 300 hours of labor off everybody in my company, like, that'd be pretty sad, So they basically say if you can get somebody to work 2,000 hours, you have a good company culture, which is good. Yes?
So if you're a small shop trying to grow, how do you incorporate this in your growth process?
So what I would do is the one single thing you can do, whether you use it or not right now, is every job track materials and labor. It's as simple as how many cans of paint, the cost of them, and then how many labor hours. And you may not need it now, but pretty soon you will. And that will basically tell you, can I afford another employee? Can we afford multiple employees? Are these employees doing well? That sort of thing. So the basis of all that, like in order to make informed decisions, you need some data. The baseline data is that job costing, material and labor. Start with that, and then you can always build off that. That's the biggest thing. And gratitude too. There was a lot of times in the last 2 years of my company where, again, we're on that fence and the labor went way over, or we're on that particular old house or something, and the material or the labor went way over, but I wasn't tracking the data close enough to show that, well, if you actually add it all up, it was a great job. So I was getting a little bit angry with some of the painters and the people in the field saying, come on, you guys gotta work harder. It's like, what, am I not teaching you right? Or do you not get it? But it turns out, if I was tracking my data a little more closely, I would find out I should have been way grateful for this. Because based on the industry average, they were actually doing really good. Excuse me. Okay, so my big ask for everybody, just like I was saying, if you do nothing else, even if you don't start calculating this stuff and using it for any good decisions, start recording your materials, start recording your hours, and if you have the time and the consistency, record the area. So, length of the fence, height of the fence, 15 by 15 bedroom. Start gathering all those things down. Even if you're a single person painter, I wish I would have done this from year one. I did simple transactions probably 3 or 4 years in. I started doing this because I wanted something to track it. But really, even if you don't calculate it, record this on every single estimate, because at the end of the year, you may be curious and you can go back and gather all this data. But getting it together while you're on the job is always going to be the most useful thing. Questions? Yes?
When you're thinking about gathering material and getting the things together, do you normally account for 2 coats on those things rather than double up your labor and doing that way?
Absolutely, yep. Yeah, so really, I mean, in our company, we don't do a calculation of square footage. Everything is based on, when we go to paint a bedroom, you get a gallon. When you go to paint a stairwell, you get 2 or 3. And it's just one of those, you get so many repetition, we don't even need to do the calculation anymore. We just know that that's what it's going to be. And but early on, we in the estimating master's class, we have the thought experiment of, gallons say 400. But in reality, when I look back at my data, it's way closer to 330, 340 on average, give or take. Yep, exactly.
More like 280, 300.
Exactly.
And that's, you got stuff that's different can and might spill. So with estimating, I got a person trying to have to figure that out with the square footage.
Yep.
Got it, but with that, how would you equate all your materials and your paint? Because what was hard for me in the beginning, especially, was trying to figure out how they get a square footage number close to or around $1
Yep.
to cover primer, 2 coats, paint, and material.
Yeah, it's always tough. And the super unsatisfying answer is the best way to find that number out is do one and then calculate it. Because otherwise you can game plan and game strategy all you want, and if I have to go on new construction before I tracked all this and try to guess how many gallons of PVA or how long or how far PVA would go on a 8,000 square foot house, you'd be calculating for 2 or 3 days and you'd probably be off by about 30%. Or you can do one, and there is a blueprint you can look at, and there is a number of gallons you use, and those are definite numbers where if you just use those 2 things, now you have, you know, exactly. And you know, if you did the estimate and you got a chance to do that, you know, on our estimates, we're very close when we estimate to actually break out priming of the walls, priming of the ceiling, so that when it comes to the prime phase of a new construction project, on that day where we prime everything, there's a set number attached to that. So then, even better, we can say, here's the revenue, here's the hours, and here's the material. We can job cost just the priming of a house, and it'll actually tell us 85 cents a square foot it costs us to paint this, you know, house. So, yep.
Where do you train your people at, in your office or on the job that you're on? Do you have a side job, like a setup where
On the
they
job.
do everything?
Yep, whatever trainer Tina's doing that day, if she's epoxying floors or, you know, doing enamel, you're just going to do that today, so.
You don't have to start them, you only mask for X amount of.
No.
You only, you know, do stuff for.
No, I'm a firm believer in, you know, yeah, exactly. I'm a firm believer in, there's been, our industry's littered with people who are like, I wasn't even allowed to spray for 2 years, so I'm looking for another job. So I'm like, listen, I learned to have a lot more faith in people than that, saying, you know what, these are intelligent people, they're smart, just let them hold a spray gun, who cares, you know? Yeah, and the faster you do it, the sooner you do it, the better they are at it, so moving on, you know? Somebody else, yes?
How much of the financial data do you share with painters? Like the overhead, how much you're paying for this in overhead, and the company made this much in profits and all that?
So the interesting thing is, years ago, I thought I could inspire a whole round of people who would like have an ownership mentality in the business, and maybe somebody even rise to be like a partner or something like that by sharing a lot of that data. And I actually didn't see a lot of return on that. Like I saw a lot of people very disinterested past a basic couple of numbers. So in most paint companies where that's held protective and safe, I've actually forced it on my company, and they're like, whatever, dude. You know, it's one of those things. So we share, I mean, every one of our folders, we run everything off the Google Drive, and in there's a project folder, my estimates in there, and everything else, all the prices are in there. You know, my argument always is, I'm not afraid to share that stuff, because if you can do what we do on your own, good, I might want to partner with you. If you want to go off on your own, if you're ambitious, good, let's work together then. Or, if you think you can do better than what we do, I might be interested in what you're doing. Otherwise, we run a pretty good ship, and we make a pretty good argument for staying with us and doing what we do, so.
Okay.
Yes, is there somebody? Yes?
So we do mainly new construction,
Mhm.
and some of the builders we work for, it's difficult to work behind, so we charge more.
Yep.
Is that standard for paint companies to do that, or?
If they pay it, yes.
Yeah.
So, it's
Some of them,
that.
I mean, the drywall papers can be just a nightmare to follow.
Yes.
And more hours with more day.
Absolutely.
The carpenters can just not get greatest carpenters, so.
Yep. So one thing that,
with new construction, we found that you have to, a lot of times it's trial and error, you do one for them,
yep.
or you choose not to do it for them.
Exactly. You know, and one thing that we've tried to work around, because I really love, because if you give somebody a PETA tax, pain in the ass tax all the time, your numbers aren't going to be level for production rates and stuff. So what I've done in the past is, you know, when we do new construction, I've always make sure to put a lot of line items in. Here's what it takes to prime all the drywall, but here's a line item under it is, here's 2 days worth of labor for fixing. And then the builders would be like, oh, we don't need that, the drywallers are done. Be like, all right, let's do a light check and we'll find out together. You know, but it's a separate thing on the estimate, and then, yeah, we can decide together. If you don't want to do it, fine, but, you know, but then all your numbers are standardized then.
Yeah, that's the problem always when you find a new builder, they want to use it. You're getting into it, and a lot of times they're not going to see that.
If, you know, the interesting thing is the stronger, a lot of times, GCs get a bad rap. It is what it is, but they have to do some of the things they do. And I can understand it a little bit, but also painters do get leaned on. I mean, that is not a joke. So now, how we can remedy that situation is we can go to them and say, you know, here's my data. I've done 32 of these before. I need to be at 85 cents a square foot for prime and drywall. And he's like, well, that's too much. It's like, well, sorry, there's 3 other builders who would do that, and honestly, that gives me just enough to pay my employees, pay Sherwin-Williams all the exorbitant amount of money they want from us, and then to also have a little bit of something for my family at the end of this as well. You know, and if a builder looks at you and say, too bad, I'll find somebody else, good. Good, because I have standards. I can't fall below this. You know? All the way back there.
You mentioned that you use Google Drive and storing estimates, things like that, but how do you incorporate that into Slack or that application? Is that what it's called?
Yes, we don't incorporate, most of those things don't talk to each other, they're just a standalone. So Slack is basically just, it takes the place of text messaging on our phone.
Group chat type of thing?
Yeah, so we employ basically all millennials, and we have to realize that they enjoy life outside of the trades. You know, like they'll kill it for you for 40 hours a week, but after that, don't text me. And we want to respect that. So instead of using the text message on their phone, you can imagine, last year we sent over 40,000 messages on Slack between the company. And imagine on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, if we're on a 20-person group text, every time somebody says something, it sends out 20 texts to everybody in the company. As a millennial, it could be your mom, it could be your grandma, your friends, or it could be that painting company that won't stop texting on the weekends. So we want Slack so you can just not look at Slack on the weekends or in the evenings, but you can hook into it. Another big benefit of Slack too is you can organize it. So the production managers make channels, and it's the Smith job. So all the communication for the Smith job goes in the Smith job, and it's not cluttered by everybody else. And then later on in the year, we have 375 channels for all the jobs we did. We can look back at any one, and there's pictures, updates, everything else. And it's this beautiful archive, and it's basically free.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, it's magical.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Seriously, you will not be disappointed. Now, but it takes somebody to adopt it. It took us 2 tries to get it into the company. I tried it alone before I had help, and then after Holly came in this last year, we did it again, and she was the champion of it, and she would not allow people to not comply. So before, when I did Slack and somebody would text message me or call me, I'd be like, oh, whatever, I'll just take this call and we'll just answer it. Holly was much better because she said Slack. Every time somebody would send a text message, Slack. And eventually, after 2 painful weeks, she drove everybody to Slack. And now we're there, so, yeah.
No Wi-Fi needed for that?
Yes, you do need internet connection for that. Yep. Yes, sir.
Say you're doing same color, repaint one coat.
Mm-hmm.
You know, is there a percentage bump? Because, you know, if you're doing 2 coats, you're already set up, you know, you have that time that you're spending the same as if you were doing 2 coats, just doing 1 coat.
We are a 2-coat company, always. So, yep, our standard operating procedure, and again, when you got this many people in the field, everything has to be standardized, because if something goes wrong, we want to be able to pinpoint it. So it definitely is not up to the discretion of our painters, 1 or 2 coats. You will do 2 coats, whether you like it or not. I'm also a firm believer of, we can do really good, but nobody's perfect in one, and we're using matte paint too. So in order to get a good shine, I think the 2nd coat is just,
You just feel it in.
just do it, yeah. And again, most people here are a self-selecting bunch. We're probably not the premium painters, painting only for rich people, but we do a really good job. And when people call us, I think that's sort of what they want out of us. And that's what I feel from my clients. So yes.
So to maintain your quality, you choose not to do 1 coats?
Yes, absolutely.
So if somebody decides, like, we're only going to do 1 coat, then you don't take it?
Yeah, I mean, there's always the exceptions. Last night I did an estimate for a couple where they just wanted the baseboards in 3 rooms touched up. They were great. We just prep them, put a coat on. That's excessive to do any more than that, but that's a special circumstance. It's not our standard.
Your prep works most of your job anyway. So what are you doing to
Actually,
repaint?
that only entails 1 coat, because they're doing the same color over. You're gonna do 2 coats over that?
Always do, yep.
Is that the same for exterior?
Yes. Yeah. So last year we dabbled. We did our. This would be an interesting piece of data for you guys too, because we were doing exteriors for the ones newer than 78. Washing, scraping, sanding the whole house, spot priming all the bare wood, using 20, 30 tubes of caulk on every house, and then 2 coats, premium paint over the top of everything. And at the end of these jobs, I was always surprised talking to the clients. They're like, oh man, that took you a long time to do 1 coat. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, we broke ourselves. Like, there's people who don't have fingerprints anymore because we sanded so much in your house. And it's like, you didn't even know I did 2 coats? That's insane. had so many of those conversations, even though it's explicitly, I verbally walk them through, this is the exact process we use, it's written on the estimate. Turns out, after you have enough of those conversations, you realize you're doing a whole bunch of stuff that they don't value and they don't care. So what I did was, good,
Cut it out.
we have that option. We can flex our muscle and do those crazy Victorian restorations. Don't need to do it on an 80 split level anymore. Like maybe that client just wants a $5,200 really good paint job with premium paint applied by good people. And so we basically change our SOP to bring it down to that, where if you want sanding, it's extra. We'll do a couple hours of caulking on the worst parts, but after that, it's time and materials. And you know what? Nobody cared the next year. We did 30% less work on houses, and we charged 30% more last year. Because that's the market would bear. If we were losing our tails on exteriors, you know, so, yes.
So I just have a testimony to your feeling versus data topic, but also a question related to that. We've been tracking revenue produced per hour since about November and getting better and better at it over the last couple of months. And we have 2 painters. They find it's really motivating and exciting to track their own performance.
Yep.
So right now, what I'm figuring out over the last month or 2 is we're getting excited because, say, you know, we have one painter do this room, he knows how many hours it's supposed to take, and he hits it, or is under budget, so he's excited, we're all doing good, but we get to the end of the project, and when you add up the total hours, we thought we're killing it, but when we actually add up the total hours at the end, it's not as good as we think,
Yep.
and so it's making it clear that, oh, there's the setup in the morning, there's the cleanup at the end of the day, there's the talking to the
The
clients.
burden of painting.
There's the, there's the breaks, there's the meetings.
Yes.
So there's like this consistent 15%, I feel like it is, that like, okay, I need to find.
How much?
Maybe 15% if
Yeah.
it is like, or
Yep.
is what revenue per hour that we're kind of coming short on when we're all done compared to what we thought it was. So I'm at this, so it's revealing to me that I either need to, like a percentage-wise of my estimating, put that in for every estimate, or
I have a
just
sneakier way
increase
for
my-
you, Therese. I did this last year.
Okay.
So, again, remember, we have 20 to 25 people meeting once a week for an hour. That is 1/40th of my expense of labor for the entire year that goes to non-productive time. So, the thought experiment goes as a boss, like, how can we recapture that? So what we did, instead of putting our hourly budgets for jobs at 55, without telling anybody, we moved them to $60 an hour. And that accounted for, that's 10% right there. And basically, it's sort of unfeelable for the most part, but when we calculate on those jump sheets, it says, if normally we say, the revenue per the job, we take out the materials and then we divide by 55, that would give a benchmark. But again, breaks, meetings, everything else, you're gonna fall below that unless your people overproduce. We sneakily kind of bumped that to 60 so that they were always shooting for something higher, knowing that there's gonna be some sick days, there's gonna be some van loading and then other stuff, so.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. I like it though.
Thank you.
More beneficial if you have means to pay for your own, have vehicles for your employees, or to have them drive their own vehicles?
Oh, it's way better if they'll drive their own vehicles. Well, and also, yeah, we traffic, we have super high core values in the company, and we traffic in decent human beings, and in turn, I need to be decent to my people, and I would never make somebody transport gear for revenue production in their own vehicles. So we have a fleet of vehicles that people use, and they're not yours, they're there, and one of the production managers will assign you one, and they'll get all the gear to the job. Most of my people in turn like to drive themselves to the job site just because they either like quiet time in their car or it's closer to their house. But either way, nobody transports, unless they volunteer to do it, nobody transports my things to and from a job site without a company vehicle. So, yeah. Just a decent thing to do. I know other companies don't do that, and it'd be great if I didn't have to pay for those vehicles. I mean, Lord knows they're in charge of the maintenance on them. We're shuttling a van or two every week to get maintained somewhere. So, yes?
Do your guys have benefits?
Yes, interesting. So right now,
How do you incorporate that into the equation?
So right now we have soft benefits, which is 4-day work week, the most flexible schedule on earth, which is they can take off whenever they want, I don't care. What else do we do for them as part of our
I'm
soft?
talking like insurance, retirement.
Oh yes, that's
Yeah.
coming, yes. So, we're working on health insurance and retirement, and that will also be labor burden now. Because yeah, that's a cost of employing now. Now, technically, you can start getting into some arguments of if it's allocated on a payroll and they pay it that way, you could slip it into burden too. Or your benefits, I think you could also make the argument that they might be overhead too, but it is dependent on the people and how much they work. So that's a bridge we have to cross, but in October, we have to make the choice for health insurance for the company, so. Yeah, yes, sir.
So, a couple questions on.
Yes.
So when you're doing this, I'm assuming you're sort of using a charge rate to build up an estimate, it's got 100 hours in it, you're figuring 50, 55, 60 bucks an hour.
Yeah.
Is there a direct correlation between your revenue per hour goal and your charge rate is sort of question one, and then question two is, do you have variability in that due to some of the seasonality here?
Oh, God,
in
yeah.
Minnesota, where in the winter you'll drop that a little bit, and then sort of take it back up in the summer, can you just sort of help me understand that?
Exactly. So the problem with, what he's asking is, you know, if you've got production rates, if you can say, I can do X amount of baseboard per hour, you can go and do an estimate, just count up the baseboard, and then you say, well, since my company charges 65 bucks an hour, or 55, just apply that to it. My company is a horrible example of that, because all of our decent human beings. If we have 20 full-time employees right now, my most senior craftsperson has been painting for 3 years. And then the next person for 2. And then it falls off a cliff. And if you add us all up and divide by years of experience, we probably have 4.5 months of painting experience in the whole company. So the problem is, do we use my production rates and my charge rate or that? So the problem is, I've actually had to, and this is part of the estimating master's class, I triangulated price. I rely more heavily on market rate now, because production rates be damned. I need to charge this to get to my company, so I don't even care what they can produce, because it ain't up to standard yet, you know. Did I answer the second part? I know that was probably the first part.
The second part was just sort of, so there's no variability, because that, your reasoning, it wouldn't change whether it's February or June.
No, exactly. And you know, when I triangulate on price, we all go by gut and experience. You know, I've been doing this 28 years. You can walk up to a house and you can say, okay, within about 2 gallons of paint for the entire Victoria restoration, in about 5 hours, I can tell you what it is. Now, in order to teach that to an estimator, we have to put some metrics to it. So we do have the production rates for that, you know, which are fine. But then again, the problem is, you use my production rates and I will undersell every single house we do. And then we use market rate. So market rate to me is more of the most valuable way that I price my projects now, is by going out and doing all those estimates every year. And I get a feeling for what we charge. The good thing is about the other company is we do 80% bread and butter painting, inside and outside, so really it's a lot of commoditized work. We're not doing a whole bunch of that stuff. There's one other piece I wanted to add to that was gonna be helpful. Yeah, my company's unique because we are so inexperienced. Down in St. Louis, I talked to a friend of mine, Nick LaGrasso. He's got 30 guys or so. Every one of them has been within between 10 and 20 years. They are so standardized. He does that same thing. His production rates per guy differ a nickel or a maybe a nickel per foot on trim to do that stuff. And his company charge rate, say it's 67, 68 bucks an hour, perfect across the board, because all his guys do the exact same thing. We are such wildcats. We are all over the place, so I wish I could do that. Yeah.
Do you have paid time off? And if you do, how do you track that? How do you pay it out? Do you get into the year?
No paid time off.
No paid time off.
No, and what I've done in the past, because we've had a bunch of these young people who haven't been in the trade very long, we said, take off whenever you want. And it's sort of an incentivized thing where, yeah, go back through Israel if you're not getting paid. So come back when you feel like you need a paycheck again, you know? That's one of those things. Yes, sir?
Do you feel like you're competing with any the union shops? Because I know that they start their apprentices probably higher than you do, and they get benefits right away, and within a certain amount of years, those guys, if your top guys making 25 bucks an hour, why would you just go pay union? Because their rate is whatever, 30 some bucks an hour now.
To me, it's almost
benefits, retirement, blah, blah, blah. So do you feel like you're competing with them, or?
No, I wish that I could send all my people to union training. They have much more rigorous training than us, and we're a really good training company. I don't even see union painters as basically the same trade. I mean, the jobs that they work on, municipal jobs, public jobs, things like that, it's so much different than what we do. I mean, this is what we do, and they're out there rolling block walls and doing.
Right, I agree with you. I mean,
But it's so much different, and it's a different lifestyle. So I had the benefit of recruiting a 6-year union painter into my company this last year. And you know, it's great. Yeah, $46 an hour, but you're laid off for 3 months a year. So that $46 an hour all of a sudden equates to basically an average paying job for 9 months a year. And they're sick of doing side jobs in the winter, and it's a little, you know, there's pluses and minuses. You cannot, I will never compete with pay and benefits. The problem is they can't compete with, you know, a company that has some structures and things like this. We are completely overwhelmed with work year round. And if somebody wants to come and be a rock star here, you know, they're not going to get shifted from shop to shop, from crew to crew, and they can do this. It's not good, it's not bad. I wish I could send some of my people to get the union experience because, again, we can buckle down and do liquid gold leaf and stuff like this. My people are not bangers. They're not out there doing thousands of square feet of cinder block every day. Like, we don't function as well as the union painters and stuff. So I see benefits in both, and especially in the union world, they're basically municipal, public work, sort of industrial work, things like that. There's really not many union shops that touch residential. Yeah.
I'm from the union, so.
Yeah. It's a completely different world.
A lot of people complain about paying in, but you gotta pay wherever you go.
Yep.
It kind of don't matter. It's how you look at it.
Exactly.
But with that being said, I got 2 questions.
Oh, absolutely, yep.
So, I think you touched on it earlier, but do you bid your jobs by the hour, or the square foot? Because you have your hourly goal you want to meet, so you bid it by that. And secondly, you're less than 5-person shop. Well, you just owner operator. Would it be feasible to get a payroll just for yourself to track what you're doing, or just kind of do what owner operators do, pay for all your expenses, your job costs, and you keep checking?
So what I would, I'll do the second one first, remind me of your first one. The simplest way is to, if you're doing paper estimates, just write your own hours in the back. We use an app to track time. So in the past, what I've done is when I was still in the field 70 or 80% of the time, I just had my own punch in, and it wasn't attached to payroll. So when I would turn it in, I wasn't getting a check from it, but it recorded my hours, and it was a lot easier on your phone. There's a whole bunch of free apps out there where you can just hit a 4-digit code, punch in, at the end of the day, 4-digit code, punch out, it'll tell you 8.17 hours. And you can even write a job name on it. So that's a super easy way to track your own hours.
So you would bid a job that way?
No.
I mean, so you know it takes 20 hours to do a job.
Yeah.
You're not gonna bid it at the $55 an hour, are you? I mean, or
Yeah.
how you gonna bid that job to meet your numbers per job?
Unsatisfying answer, I go at market rate. Because in the example of the bedroom, if I were to bid, I know the market rate because we've done these experiments and I do 800 estimates a year. I know that the market will bear somewhere between $375 and $425. So my goal, I don't care how long it takes us. I want to charge the maximum I can while still having a good reputation. So for me, I just go after that and then say, well, listen, if it's a bedroom that I can do, I did a bedroom from start to finish live on Facebook. It took me 2 hours and 45 minutes. My apprentices sometimes take 6 to 7 hours. You know, and that just is what it is. I mean, I can't bid it on a 6-hour job. I can't bid it on a 3-hour job. I have to say, the market will bear about $400. I'm gonna charge $400 no matter what I do it or they do it. It's just with the apprentices, I hope I can keep them around long enough so they get training to get to the 3-hour. Because that's where it gets really interesting. So, it's an unsatisfying answer, but I can't do production rates in my company. Like with new construction or industrial work is about the closest I can get. It gets me close. But then I also have to say, what's the market bearing right now? Are there a lot of painters out there ready to do this work? Do people have enough people like we do to do the work? And you can sort of manipulate that a little bit, but it's not an easy math equation. Then you kind of have to, you know, do one of those and say, what is it? Yeah.
And the other one was payroll.
Oh yes, help me understand again.
How do you, I mean, owner operator, would it be, would it be a good thing to incorporate a payroll just for yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Most people push this off way too long. I've been in business for 13 years. It took me 11 years to get myself on payroll. I was just this floater, kind of did, and exactly, and you're not getting great numbers, because when you look back at,
it's easier to track that way if you want payroll again, right?
right here, because the biggest miscalculation, if you want to talk about missing burden and missing a real number, how about missing paying yourself? Because if you weren't in your company, you would have had to pay somebody to do all those estimates, and most people, when they start talking about a net profit number of 15 to 20%, or you hear some guys talk, I made 35% profit that year. You forgot to take out your own pay, dum-dum. Like, that's a huge expense. If you weren't here, you'd have to pay somebody to do it. And that's a huge miscalculation. So again, a lot of guys think they're out there killing it. But if you hired somebody to do your job, I would say hiring somebody at $77,000 a year is still pretty light to do 800 estimates a year and run a company. You know, so I would definitely get on payroll sooner than later. Even if you're a single person company, make yourself a W-2 employee, give yourself an hourly rate, because it's a expense that you have to deal with. And then you can actually come up with a little more labor rate, and then the money left over is profit. So I would absolutely do that.
So is that how you would create the profit for the business?
Yes, absolutely. It would give you a more clear number. Instead of you having to back out, instead of you trying to then assume, if you didn't physically pay yourself a W-2 during the year, you would have to go back and then just on the honor system say, okay, if there's $100,000 left over at the end of the year, I really should back out about 50 or 60 of that as my pay. So I really only made a $50,000 profit instead of a $100,000 profit. So way better to start that earlier than later. That's a great question. Almost nobody asks that, almost nobody does it. And it took me 10 years to do it.
Well, I'm new, I'm trying to find out everything.
It's way better to have it and then build on it. So absolutely. Yes?
If you run a company, you say, my father and I own a big company. So if we were gonna get ourselves on our own payroll, with our guys,
Yep.
is it beneficial to make your company an S corp and then take the leftover money?
So
Tax collection money?
that question is way better handled by you guys and a lawyer. But generally speaking, I was an LLC, getting ready to move to an S corp, and then all of a sudden the Trump tax changes came in, and for maybe one more year it was beneficial to stay like that. So if there's not one right or wrong way, definitely talk to an accountant and a lawyer. And I think for $600 to $800, they will not only give you the advice, but file it all for you, and then you know for sure for the rest of your business life, it's good. I wish I could be more helpful, but I would give you bad advice. Yes, sir.
So you talk about hiring good human beings.
Yep.
Do you have a benchmark for that? Is there something that you look for? I mean,
Laugh.
leadership skills,
Yes.
drive. Is there something that you specifically look for?
Surprise, surprise, we personality test them on a DISC profile, and we actually have a dartboard. If anybody's ever taken a DISC profile, you can see yourself on a quadrant like that. It's a dartboard. You know, the business owner will be here, a salesperson will be here, maybe a production manager here, and a painter here. We have them take one of those, and it puts a dot on the map that says how ideal they're going to be. And I took a benchmark test, like I was the perfect craftsperson in my own company, and that's our benchmark we go off of. Now, for painters, it doesn't disclude anybody. I had somebody, I created the benchmark, and just by chance, a young guy named Chase came looking for a job randomly, and he just took the personality assessment, and his dot was almost touching the benchmark. It was like, I don't even care who you are. If you got one leg, I'm hiring you, because you're gonna be real close to our benchmark. Like, let's just do this, you know? And he came on, and he's ideal. That's not perfect, but if somebody else, you know, Cowboy, is way over on the other side. He comes with his own problems, but he comes with his own benefits. And so with painters, it just tells you where on there, how much training they're gonna need or how little training. There's people who, the closer they have the personality test like mine, the least amount of training they're gonna get, but they're gonna be Bolsheviks. Like, they're gonna be rebels. They're gonna try their own thing. They're gonna be out there doing their own processes and things. And now, I don't discriminate on painters based on that. I absolutely discriminate based on production managers and salespeople. They need to have a very specific thing. I'm looking for something very specific. And those two behind you are super testaments of that, where they basically off the scale of perfect production managers, and it worked out well. If they were cowboyish, it would have been like, great, you're a good person, but you're just not good for production manager. So, yes?
For the amount of tools and materials that we have bought from, Sherwin-Williams, our buckets, our graders, our rollers, our ribbons, everything, our brushes.
Yep.
I should have a plethora of everything. Now, do you, is it something where, employee ever has to buy their own, or does the company always set them up with their own? Do you set up the job yourself, and you are always going to bring it back? Like, I have so much stuff.
How many years of business have you been in?
6, but my dad's been 30.
Okay, because normally, this is the, if you follow like the path of a warrior, the path of a paint business owner, there comes a trial where you need to just get over it.
Yeah, I know.
Sadly, I mean, we all know it, but it's like I had to cross that path too, where when I was in the field, I had my 4 Rubbermaid coats and everything had like a foam cutout. And it was all these specialized tools and everything was just perfect. Nothing ever got lost. The first time I took all my beautiful tools out and we split off into another crew, the screwdriver was bent, one knee pad, it's just like, what the hell happened here? Like, I don't understand. And you just like, you're ready to fire people, burn down your company. You realize, if you actually look at the data with the feelings are, this is horrible, everybody's gonna lose their job unless I find my other knee pad strap. But, if you look at the data, it's a rounding error at the end of the year. And that's something where I could put my belt in my teeth and just buy 40 new screwdrivers every year and move on with your life. I mean, don't ruin your life with that. If you're gonna send out your Festool or sprayers, do it. If not, don't. I mean, listen, we have real things to worry about. Like, so if you have 2 hours a day to track down tools or 2 hours a day to train a human being, I would just train a person and say, you know what, the added productivity that you're gonna do is gonna buy 1,000 screwdrivers this year, so who cares, But I still doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
But I look at everybody still in the company like, you guys are doing great, and I'm just counting up all the damn heads that come by. But they are doing great, and you have to be grateful. But if I didn't have the data, it would be a... Yes, sir?
You said that your people, I think the longest is 2 years.
Yes.
Is there a reason why you can't keep them that long?
We've only had people really like that for, we restarted the company 3 years ago. My most senior person has been with me since the restart of the company. I had 3 people working for me, and they all left on a Friday night. They went to do religious callings and things like that, which I'm fine. Didn't help business though. But after that, I hired 2 people at a time until we got about 10 or 20 people. And the first person I hired, that first group of people, he's still with me. Again, data and feelings. I feel like I've failed as a boss if everybody doesn't stay with me the rest of their lives. The data is, on average, millennials will stay about 2.1 years at a job. So I'm looking at my 3-year person saying, I am killing it. I should be so grateful for this guy for staying here. I look at Tina at 2 years, perfectly average. I love this. Everybody else, we're just getting there. And I think I speak for the other people from my company here. We've been in the longest stage of, it's just everything is going rock solid now. The only problem is we've only done all this stuff in the last 2 to 3 years, so really that's about it. But again, I will say, that guy down in Missouri who keeps his people 10 to 20 years, that doesn't happen. Those people are not out there. You will not find them. If you do, they're unicorns. Hold on to them. But do not plan on a business around that. I plan a business around somebody's going to stay with me 1 to 3 years. And if we have 20 people, if there's enough churn, we got 20 people. There's going to be enough people to train, enough people to fill in, and I'm certainly going to make the argument to stay the rest of your life, but I certainly understand if you don't. So, doesn't feel good though. Yes?
You said you base things on market rate. So is that something you're just doing by trial and error on your bids? Like,
Yeah.
This one worked, should I try to do a little higher the next one? Or is it like information you get on the website?
The best way to track that is, like last year, 800 estimates. I looked at what we charge, for cabinet jobs. And I noticed that my cabinet job acceptance was maybe 60 or 60, thanks a lot, guys, appreciate it. 60 to 65%. It's like, it's a little high. So maybe we should try adding another couple dollars a door and drawer, because I feel like, we have way too much work that we can handle, and we're getting way too much work. So why don't we just ratchet it up just a little bit to see what it is? And then you can see your numbers do that. So this unsatisfying part is the best, hey, thanks guys, appreciate it. You guys take care. The best part is do 100 estimates, get the data from it, and then figure that out, you know? And it's tough because I'm forced to do market rate only because we can't do charge rates and production rates because we're all over the map. It'd be so easy if I could. You know, just 15 by 15 room, here's the square footage times $47.50 an hour, it would spit it out every time. The problem is, like, I do realize when I give a lot of this advice, I do have the sort of cheat code of having 28 years of doing it too. That doesn't hurt. But now you can't, you know, I have to teach this to other people, so it also has to be a little bit quantifiable too. So, yes?
How about maybe this is for the two you having back, the data sheets that you have, is there a specific program, or did you punch all that in yourself and save the sheets for every week that you go through, you just open it, or is there a app for that on the computer?
What do we use, guys?
What do you use?
I missed the
I'm
question,
sorry.
sorry.
Oh, sorry, they're working.
Sorry, sorry, Slack updates are coming through.
Google.
What
So-
do you use for your data sheets, for all of your job costing and everything?
Google
that you're
Sheets.
doing?
Google Sheets.
You punch it all in yourself, and then
Yep.
you create
So
it,
we
and
just
save
bas-
that template?
We basically have a template that we use, copy and paste, and then when we're using like the job costing and all that, we just have formulas that just reference different tabs within that document. And so they're just always, you know, as we're typing numbers in, it's punching those numbers all on a different tab or whatever. So we just have a big data sheet basically built in Google
Excel or
Sheets.
something?
Google's version of Excel, yes.
Okay,
Exactly.
wonderful.
And again, we're big fans of omnipresent, free, cheap, easy, and Google's not going anywhere, and Google Drive is free, and we use it a lot, so.
And you can do a lot with Excel and Sheets. The more and more you use it, the more and more you'll be surprised how much you can actually do with it.
Just gonna have time to sit down and do it.
Is that everything you've seen up here? This is a G sheet. It's just, I color code them, they look real fancy. All this is adding and subtracting. And in about an hour, you can go through and make all the magical things. So if you change the amount of painters to 15, it'll change all these down here too, so you can game plan and stuff like that. So, anybody else? Yes, sir.
How many times did Wes take you to lunch last year?
3, hell, you're doing good.
No more questions.
Wes comes to my farm and shoots pheasants. I tell him for every pheasant he shoots, I get another $3 off a gallon of rations. That's how it works. Oh man, I want 3 lunches out of Wes. But all right, guys, thanks everybody. You guys sat here long enough. I really appreciate it.